and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mastering the Business of Yoga. I am super excited that you're joining me for today's episode of the show, as always. And today on the podcast, I am excited to be joined by returning guest Renee Clair. Reneé, for those of you who have never listened to her on the show or maybe encountered her business, is a dear friend of mine, and she takes women-owned businesses from chaos to clarity using her holistic three-pronged approach: Streamlined Business, Motivational Mindset, and Clear Purpose. She has a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology and decades of experience across marketing, sales, operations, and wellness, and she brings a diverse skill set to her work. She draws on her experience from recruiting, project management, marketing strategy, and human resources to really empower entrepreneurs and their teams to thrive. And she serves as a consultant for small businesses and a coach for service providers, fostering growth and resilience for people. So, Renee has been on the show before, like I mentioned, but it had been a couple of years since we chatted. So we kicked off this episode of the show by catching up on what she's been up to. She talks about going through a rebrand in her business and so much more. And then we dive into the main topic for today, which is talking about empowerment through self-care. And Renee shares 4 kind of non-conventional ways that you can do this in your life and business, which include time management, goal setting, self-belief, and networking. So this is not your kind of conventional self-care episode. We're not talking massages, bubble baths, all that stuff, which as you'll hear in the episode, I love all of that. But I really love how Renee makes this really tangible and easy to digest for anyone, and also really accessible for anyone out there who's really wanting to empower themselves in their business through the use of self-care. So I love this episode. I love this topic. And at the end, we also do some tips for implementing all of this into your life. So making it really practical in the end. So I hope that you guys enjoy this episode of the show. And without further ado, here is Renee. Renee, welcome to the podcast today. I'm really excited to have you here with me.
Good morning, Amanda. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you back. You are a fan favorite for sure. You've been on the podcast a number of times. So really excited to have you here with me again. And we've got another new topic for listeners, which I'm really excited about. But I wanted to kick things off just with like kind of a high level overview of what you've been up to. We are looking back in the archives, and it's been over 2 years since we chatted. So the last episode that you were on the podcast went out at the beginning of 2022. So I'm curious if you can just tell us what the last 2 years has looked like.
Yeah, let's do a "Where is she now?" segment. First of all, I cannot believe it's been that long, but I've missed everybody. I've done a pivot recently, and I want to share that because I know that there's so many yoga teachers who think about pivoting their own career, or, kind of wonder, whatever everybody else is doing. So I've gone through a pivot. So last time you heard from me, I was the Predictive Wellnesspreneur, and I've since rebranded, and I'm now Renee Clair Consulting. And so it's been a treat to just kind of really zoom out and look at everything that I've been doing in the world and align a little bit more deeply with my purpose. And so I'm still teaching productivity techniques. That's still at the core of everything I do. But I've realized that I just really enjoy showing women how to empower themselves. And so I'm calling myself an empowerment strategist now instead of a productivity coach. And so that feels like so much more like just standing in my own power. And I've recently rolled out some new, fun, exciting ways for people to work with me, learn with me, and just go on this journey together. So it's just been a a really like fun time of exploration. And so, hey, if you're at that point in your life where you feel like you might be on the verge of pivoting, lean into it and, maybe work with a coach or a therapist and just kind of explore. You never know what's in store for you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That makes me feel like we could do like a whole podcast episode on pivoting because it's huge, right? It's like scary to pivot. It's nerve-wracking to pivot. And then it's a lot of work to also pivot because you're like, you want to keep your audience engaged and excited about you while also doing what's best for like you, your business, and kind of your target audience, basically. So I'm proud of you for making that pivot. And I love that you're calling yourself an empowerment strategist. And that's so linked to today's topic, which is empowerment through self-care. So I think a good place to start with this is just talking about like what self-care is, because I feel like self-care kind of in like the health and wellness, like the yoga space, sometimes gets this like bubble baths and massages and don't get me wrong, I love a bubble bath, I love a massage, but I think sometimes that can feel like really unattainable for us if we're like a busy like person, if we have a partner, if we have a job, if we have a business, if we have kids. It's like, when on earth am I supposed to do this? And on top of that, it's like, rising costs, blah, 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 blah. So anyways, all that to say, can we start by just like defining self-care in the way that you define it in your business?
Yeah. What the heck is self-care, everybody? Yeah, I agree. When I first heard of the notion of self-care, I was really into it. And then I just felt so discouraged because I was like, okay, self-care takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And I don't have either of that right now, especially when I was in my 20s and going to grad school and raising my doggy and figuring things out. Now I'm a little older and wiser, and I realized that self-care is just so much more. It's deeper than all of that. Self-care is really caring for yourself in this really organic, natural, beautiful way. And it's a deeper form of listening to yourself and what you need in any given moment. And so sometimes, like, for example, I'll pause now and I'll be in the middle of a full work day. I try to say full instead of busy because full to me means being more mindful and connected. Maybe that's another form of self-care. But I'm like, okay, what do I need in this moment? I feel a little overwhelmed. Okay, I need to just step back. Oh, okay. And like, okay, wait, I woke up this morning feeling tired. What do I need? Oh, my body says it wants water today. Okay, I'm just gonna make sure to drink water. And all of those things are free. They're in the moment. Hopefully they're free because I know sometimes water can cost money. But it's just staying a lot more connected and knowing that self-care happens momentarily and breath by breath rather than, oh, I'll schedule, myself a bubble bath from 2 weeks from now when I have, time and I have a sitter for the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I know we're going to dive into some like cool categories of self-care. So, and I think that they're a little bit like non-traditional from what we think of, which I really love because yeah, like I said, love a massage, love a bubble bath, but I do love your perspective of like, okay, tuning into what I need right now. And maybe that is like, I need to just hydrate today, or I need really nourishing food. I just got back from a beach vacation, which is obviously like a huge blessing, but I've also been eating like resort food for 10 days. So what do I need? I need water and healthy food, home cooked, nutritious food that's like not fried in oils and, things like that, like no chips, no fried food, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I need. And so I really love that perspective of tuning into that, because I think that for all of us is something that can just be like a more mindful version of self-care that can feel a little more attainable than maybe these like get an infrared sauna and do your cold plunge and get your massage after. It's like,
Yes.
yeah,
And
who has time and money for that?
yes. Gosh, yeah, there's so many cool things that I want to try. And I'm like, okay, I have to make a wise choice. Like, do I want to spend money on that or do I want to spend money on groceries? Or something like that. But I do want to recognize everybody. I do think there's a time and a place that if you have like a food craving, that's a form of self-care too. Because I am a big fan of potato chips. And so sometimes my body wants freaking potato chips and I'm gonna go get them. But yes, like you never know. And then other times I want salmon and broccoli. It's the wildest craving, and I only get it once in a while, and I'm just like, okay, I've got to go have my salmon and broccoli for whatever reason. And then after that, it's like the craving goes away, my body feels nourished, my mind feels lighter, It's really incredible. But I share those examples because, Amanda, it's not about the food. It's like anything, right? Like that glass of water, that break, that talking to a friend on the phone. So yeah. But yeah, these four topics are a little different. They do come from a business aspect as well, which I think can be really helpful.
Hey, yoga teachers, do you work for a small studio that is in need of a reliable software solution? Too often, the smaller businesses out there get stuck using a complex software solution that's too expensive and a poor fit for their business needs. Paying too much for software features they don't need or use is literally throwing money away. But our friends at Offering Tree have stepped up to help folks just like you. They recently released a version of their studio software for boutique studios called Studio Lite. This package comes with all the features you need to run your studio, including marketing automation, staff payroll, details reporting, and more. And it comes with a low price tag, a brilliant support team, and customized migration to make the transition from one software to another as seamless as possible. What more could you want? You can go ahead and book a quick demo with Offering Tree to learn more. Use the link offeringtree.com/MBOM to access my partner discount of 50% off your first 3 months or 15% off your first annual Studio Lite plan. Once again, that's offeringtree.com/MBOM to get started. All right, now back to the episode. Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into the first one. The first one is time management as a form of self-care. So tell me more about how time management can be a form of self-care for ourselves.
Yeah, this category, I know it's kind of like, wait, what? Like time management? But for me, this is actually how I started taking care of myself. I was in the middle of my own yoga teacher training at the time. I'm a certified 200-hour, by the way, everyone. And I realized all of my time was spent on my course, on my friends, at work, extracurricular activities, the needs of my ex-husband at the time. And I had no room for myself. And I was just kind of entering rock bottom without even realizing it and becoming exhausted. I wasn't sleeping or eating or moving or exercising. I didn't have a practice for myself. I was just really focused on output and helping others. And so the minute that my therapist really suggested that I hunker down and get a paper planner and start being mindful of how I was spending my time so I could stop double, triple booking myself, it was a game changer. And the three things that she said I should focus on were eating, sleeping, and moving. And to me, it was just this new thing. I was just so astonished that anybody could suggest that, right? Because who has time for eating and sleeping and moving when we can, not do that and do everything else? But slowly over time, with really looking at how I was spending every minute, every hour, I realized, oh my gosh, I was becoming more mindful. I was practicing what I was preaching as a yoga teacher. I was able to start focusing on self-care first. I would allow myself to be a little late to work, knowing that there wouldn't be too much of an impact as long as I made sure I had breakfast to fuel my mind and body for the day. And then the deeper that I got into really, being mindful of how I was spending my time was creating time blocks and realizing that that was allowing me to set boundaries, that I wasn't double and triple booking myself anymore. And that if a friend, a colleague, a client said, hey, can I book you at 10 a.m.? I could say, I hear that time works for you, but I'm booked at that time. They don't need to know, I'm sleeping in or taking a nap or whatever it is. But I do have 3 o'clock on Friday available. Does that work instead? And so it was a really graceful way of saying no without saying no. And that's kind of the crux of everything I've been teaching for the past 4 years is how to really nourish your mind, body, and soul by honoring how you're spending your time and just really showing up in life. Does that make sense, Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to add on to this because this was some work that you and I did together. That was really impactful for me. And I know when you hear time management as a form of self-care, it feels so polar opposite from massages and bubble baths and stuff like that. But it is huge. And I know when you and I worked together, I think it was the end of 2020 and, pandemic had been happening. I'd been working for myself for, it'd been 5 years at that point. Things were going well in my business, but the thing that wasn't going well was just that I was working with clients at all hours, all times. I think I had stuff literally every single day of the week. And one of the things you encouraged was like, okay, we need to get you like one full day off where you're not doing any work. And then that shifted, within I think 6 months of like, okay, can we get you two full days off of work? And then it's like, can you set some time in the morning for a morning routine? I never understood how people did these morning routines. And it's like, because you actually schedule them and you set time for them. So you acknowledge what time is good for you to wake up, how much time you need, what you actually want to do. And, still boundaries that I stick to today, what is it, like 4 years later, 3 years later, since we did that work together. And it's like my weekends are, outside of a few exceptions, which I'm very conscious about saying yes to, my weekends are free. I keep my evenings pretty open. And it's like, I generally don't have calls before like 10 a.m. That's kind of how my schedule is set up. So I've got a little bit of time for myself in the morning. And it is so powerful. Like, I feel like it was like taking my own power back as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, and then also giving myself that time to do my morning stretching and do my morning meditation and do my morning journaling and eat breakfast so that I could set myself up for success. And even things like, you were like, do you have like a scheduled lunch break? I was like, no. Like sometimes I eat lunch at 11, sometimes I eat lunch at 2, sometimes I don't eat lunch. So, I think that's really common with people like you and I who work for ourselves.
Yeah, we're just going, and that's what society teaches us, is that it's kind of a masculine belief. It's like, just go. You will fail if you don't keep going and push yourself hard. And I'm like, no, if we push ourselves too hard, we break. And then what do we have that's left to show up and continue to do the great work we're supposed to do in the world and share our gifts? But I have to say, Amanda, like, watching you empower yourself was just incredible. I was tearing up as you were telling your story, because it just set you up for like everything else that you've been doing in your own life, and just expanding upon that, and having like time and room for kiddos and things like that. And so I just think it's like been so incredible. It was an honor to work with you, of course. But yeah, I was the same way too. I was like, what? Take a lunch? Why? I don't need that.
Yeah, for sure. We do, though. We do. We need to eat. We need that break. We need to step away from our screens. And I think the more you like set those boundaries too, like you gave that example of like, I'm not available at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, but I am available at 3 p.m. on Friday. The more it gets easier. It's like going to the gym and working a muscle, right? At first, we kind of have this terror of like, if I say no to this, maybe they don't want to work with me, or et cetera, et cetera. They think a certain way about me, but it's like people respect when you have boundaries. And that's one of the things I found from exercising that. Like when I asked the clients that I was doing weekend work for, like, hey, I really need my weekends because I'm working full time during the week and I'm working on the weekends for you. Could we shift our call from Saturday to Monday? Yeah, no problem. Like it was a non-issue. It was only an issue in my head. I'd made like a whole story about it, about how they were going to fire me or let me go and not want to work with me, blah, blah, blah. And it was a non-issue.
It's so incredible. Yeah, these, like, I call them like the mind monsters, they just like creep up on us, and it's so scary at first to build the habit. I totally agree. And sometimes I still even deal with it now, but I've gotten a little stronger through, practicing my time management, And but yeah, I totally agree with you that just building that habit feels uncomfortable at first, but there's so much more that lies ahead if you just keep going.
Absolutely. Amazing. And so the second one is goal setting as a form of self-care, which is also non kind of conventional. So tell us more about how we can use goal setting to empower ourselves.
Everybody's probably listening to this episode late. They're like, well, wait a minute, what is happening? What am I listening to? Goal setting is pretty amazing, everybody. It's another thing that I teach my clients how to do. I can't tell you how many clients I have that come to me and I'm like, okay, let's work together. Let's work on your business. Let's work on how you're spending your time. What are you working towards this year? I don't know. or I'm just working. I just need to keep the lights on. And I'm like, okay, but when we do that, when we just kind of work to work or do to do, we're almost, well, I would say most of the time, unknowingly, we're existing in this place of lack and in this place of scarcity and fear. And so we're setting up our business and our personal lives surrounded and shrouded and it's not good feeling. And so what I've really discovered that helps to reframe, what's going on and motivate the mind is actually setting a goal, something to work towards as a guidepost. And it's pretty incredible because your mind shifts from that lack space to abundance, that you're working on something. And, you know, also goal setting has a lot to do with like detaching, like not being tied too closely to the goal and just enjoying the journey, and then finding those moments of gratitude as you get there, embracing like the smaller goals to the bigger goal. More often than not, I see people disbelieve that they'll ever achieve something, and then when they are mindful and set the intention of a specific goal, they surprise themselves and achieve it so much more sooner just by like allowing themselves the desire to pursue it.
I love that. Yeah, I think that it is helpful to like, because we can get so like on the hamster wheel of just like being in our business and like being in life and paying bills and buying groceries and just doing the day-to-day thing, which is like, I love routines. I think routines are really great and super helpful, but I think we have to be really conscious as to like our why and our purpose and like what we're working towards. And I do feel like goals can be really helpful with that. And I feel like this has been like one of the most helpful things for me. I feel like an example that comes to mind is like being saving for travel in the past. It's like, maybe on paper, like if you looked at my expenses and how I was spending money, it's like, okay, she's never going to be able to spend or save like this much money for travel. But I feel like once I set a goal of like, this is when I want to leave, this is where I want to go, this is how much I want to save, and like broke it down like that, it was like, I can do this, I can make this happen. And I think you can kind of look at that with any goal, whether it's like a health and fitness goal in terms of like, running a 5K or a 10K or something like that, or getting more followers on social media, or getting more email list subscribers, or making X amount of revenue in your business and getting X amount of clients. It's like when we start setting those goals and breaking them down, it's like, then we can actually start seeing that progress. And I feel like that's like one of the most empowering things as a solopreneur is when you set a goal and you actually work towards it and you achieve it. You're like, I'm a freaking badass.
Heck yeah. Yes, it feels so great. And I've seen you do and achieve so many things. And I was thinking about a client of mine who's an amazing yoga teacher. She didn't think it would be possible to save up enough money for adoption in a certain period of time, but she set these goals, and she and her husband were able to do so. And she saw herself getting more teaching gigs and other gigs that she never thought possible, but just creating that space in your mind and just allowing like whatever opportunity to arise to help you achieve the goal is just so empowering. It's just so incredible. And I realize I'm saying the word empowering a lot now too.
No, I love it. I think that that's great. And that's a beautiful example as well. I feel like it's so the next one we're going to talk about is self-belief. And I feel like these are really tied together because I feel like we can do the tangible things, but I do feel like there has to be like this like belief in ourselves followed by the action. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So self-belief as a form of self-care. This one is interesting. I shy away from talking about it, but now in my new role as an empowerment strategist, I'm bringing it up. So I didn't talk about it too often because it's like, oh, don't talk about politics, religion, and other things. And this isn't so much religion, but when you're developing your self-belief, another word of it for it could be confidence, but sometimes I lack confidence, but I still believe in myself. There's a few things that we can tap into. And the first thing as yogis that we hear a lot about is like our intuition, trusting ourselves, listening to our gut, our sacral center, our Manipura chakra, right? And really tapping into that. And so I feel like as yogis on our journey, we get stronger in that area. The other part that we all tap into, but I don't think we talk enough about, is really connecting with our higher power. We've got our altars and things like that we're drawing inspiration and guidance from. And it's so important that as we meditate, which I believe is a form of listening, but we're also praying or asking or talking to our higher power, asking for that wisdom and guidance to lead us through our life. Also, I want to bring this up as a form of a tool. I've been learning to embrace it a little bit more. It kind of comes and goes because it's seen as a sign of weakness. But in order to develop a stronger belief in ourselves, it's important to move through the emotions. And especially, for us yogis to really honor that in the form of crying sometimes and knowing that that's okay. And then if the sooner that we can accept that we're crying and we're moving through emotions, that sooner that we can get stronger in who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like that's like, yeah, I mean, certainly I think like the way I was brought up, it was kind of like, why are you crying? Stop crying. And it's so interesting. I mean, we were talking about this before. I have a toddler. She's recently turned 2 and she's like big personality. She's like full of emotions. And I think kids are a really great example of like, they don't have like emotional intelligence. They don't have control over our emotions. And of course, this is something that's important for us to learn. But I think sometimes we swing so far the other side where we like don't let anything out. We don't let anything flow through. And sometimes it's like she just has a cry. And I'm like, what is making you so sad right now? And I think it's like she just has some feelings. Maybe it's like a couple days worth of feelings that just need to move through. And it's an interesting example of like just being really uninhibited in terms of like how you feel. Like I feel this thing, it needs to come out of me. And I think it's so important for us to like encourage that at a young age. Like, sometimes it's hard as a parent, but I'm like, okay, you have these feelings. I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to hold space for you. I'm going to hold you. I'm going to let that flow through you. And then turning around and allowing myself, like holding space for myself to like feel that too. Cause it's so like, it's not as intuitive for me to just be like, I'm gonna like have a cry now, but it is so cathartic for us to just like let those feelings move through us.
Yeah, I totally agree. Oh my gosh, you're the best mom. Yeah, I grew up in a home where she really is everybody. I grew up in a home where a parent was suffering from a mental illness. And so for me, if I cried, it just created more turmoil. So there wasn't space for me. So I learned to like really like put that to the side. And then that false belief that I couldn't cry really made me feel, well, there's no room for me. There's no room. I'm not good enough. Like these false beliefs like kept creeping up and kind of compounding on one another. And so you're right, like crying is so cathartic. And to be able to move through all of that, like you really start to accept yourself for who you are, and you therefore believe in yourself just ever so much.
Yeah, I love that. And there's one other point I wanted to touch on, which is around the intuition. And I feel like, my yoga practice, my meditation practice, journaling has been one of the most like impactful and powerful things for me in terms of like tuning into my intuition. One thing I wanted to ask you about is just kind of like taking that and actually turning it into something tangible. Cause I feel like, and I don't know if listeners can relate to this, or maybe you can, Renee, but it's like, I feel like sometimes my best ideas come to me in like a shavasana or like a meditation. But then it's like I get out of that like beautiful little bubble that I've created and I kind of get back into my real life. And then my head starts talking, right? It's like not my heart, it's not my intuition. It's my head starts being like, oh, well, do you actually have time for that? Is that a practical idea? How would you actually do that? Blah, blah, blah. So I'm curious how we kind of like take the work we're doing with our intuition and tuning into that and work with our higher power and actually like trust in that a little bit more, like act on it a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Okay, that's such a great question, and so many ideas came to mind. But I see two things. Like the first thing, if when I get that miracle idea when I'm in the shower, I get out and I either Tylenol, either write it down, just like take a few thoughts. I'm sorry, take a few moments to write it down. Or sometimes I'll grab my phone and I'll just do a voice memo, just say like, just so I can just get it out. And that's really cool because you can come back to it later and maybe make a plan, if you feel so inclined. But then there's the other part of that, which is this is going to be a little more interesting is trusting, right? Trusting that if for some reason you forget that it will come back around if it's meant to, manifest itself. And sometimes these ideas, this spring of, wisdom that we get little glimpses of it, but maybe it's not time to manifest it in the present moment. Maybe it's just meant to like kind of tease us and get us ready for maybe what's further down the road, or give you an idea that sparks something else that is like a building block. So that trust is kind of interesting. And then all of this reminds me, Amanda, I've gotten back into human design recently. And so I was kind of exploring that. And I was thinking of you because you've had so many speakers and you yourself are so great at when it comes to like diving in and learning the principles of human design, but kind of leaning into those principles of, your purpose here on this planet. What do you think?
Mm. Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's great. And I love the like piece of trust because I think, yeah, I guess sometimes there is, I guess like the action taker in me is like, oh, I need to do something with this. But sometimes an idea needs to like marinate or brew for a little bit. Like sometimes it's not totally the right time to just take action. Sometimes it is as well. And I think it's important to just like identify when we're leaning maybe into like the fear of not doing something versus like it's not the right time, which I think only we can really identify, maybe with the help of like a coach or a counselor or something like that. Um, but yeah, I love that concept, and I feel like it just resonates with me a lot in terms of like, yeah, just leaning into these pieces, like doing our practices, trusting that things will happen when they're meant to happen, which I think is really hard for a lot of us sometimes. But yeah, also knowing who we are. I know it's like a bit, I know like astrology and like human design can be a little bit woo woo for some people. And it's like, my husband's like a really great example. He's very like thoughtful and critical and masculine in that way. And for me, it's like been a journey to kind of lean into it because it does feel a little bit like, am I just leaning into things based on the planets, or am I making excuses for myself not wanting to do this right now? But I do feel like there's been so much like freedom with like human design and astrology as well. Like that's how I am. I don't need to be like these other people that I see on the internet. Like I can lean into exactly who I am, which allows me to explore my gifts a little bit. I think when we do that, we can feel really empowered in who we are.
Yes. Yes, I love that. I totally want to highlight. So yeah, if the human design, astrology, stuff isn't for you, I totally get it. I actually started off my life very much that way. And so then the other thing that you said, which is perfect, is just accepting yourself as you are now, and that everything will come together. That's so amazing. Do you want to hear one of the glimmer moments in my life that I'm not
Yes.
ready for? Okay. Years ago, as a yoga teacher, I was in my own Shavasana and I had a dream of me in a huge auditorium and it was darkened and I could see all of these people and there's a spotlight on me and I'm at a podium. And so at that time, I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, and I'm like, what does this mean? If I'm a yoga teacher, I'm not going to stand up here at a podium, like what is that? What does this dream even mean? And it's like come up and it's like again and again, and it's getting stronger as I get older. But, I look at my situation, my life situation now, and I'm like, well, that still isn't serving me, like that doesn't seem like the timing's right. And so I'm just kind of accepting that it's there. I come back to it maybe to draw strength from time to time. And I just allow it to be there because it's kind of like a cool vision, but I don't know when it might manifest or if it might ever be.
Yeah. No, I think that that's beautiful because I think it's like you had this vision, but it's like maybe it's taking its time to unfold, and everything you're doing up until we get to that point will be exactly what you need to do to get you to that actually like taking place. That makes sense.
It does. It's my own self-belief journey,
I love
everybody.
it. That's beautiful. And so the last thing or the last aspect of empowerment through self-care that we're going to talk about is networking as a form of self-care. So tell me more about that.
Another shocking one, right, everybody? Like, what does networking have to do with self-care? This is such an important skill that I've really started to lean into and embrace to empower myself. Networking is incredible because you help yourself remember that you're not alone. You're not alone on your business journey. You're not alone on your personal journey. And you meet people and they might inspire new idea within you, or you might see something from them that sparks an idea within you. And you might find people to collaborate with, or you might get your next teaching gig, or start up a studio with someone. There's so many things that can happen. And I think oftentimes in our society we're told that we're supposed to do everything alone, and it makes our lives very, very lonely. especially if you're a yoga teacher and you're like the only one in your family or your community, you can definitely start to feel like the salmon swimming upstream or like an outcast. But the more that we network, the more that we realize we're not alone, we're strong, we can serve, we have people supporting us, we have people to do things with. Other forms of income will come into play, and it's just yet another avenue to create that abundance in our lives. And when I talk about abundance, I don't necessarily mean money. It could be just like that feeling of love and support and, nourishment, if you will.
Yeah, no, I love that. I agree. I think and one of the things I think that you're maybe not like prepared for in a yoga teacher training is just like how lonely the journey can be if you aren't networking. And I think it's like the perspective is that you're surrounded by students. So if you're teaching classes, but in terms of like other people doing the same thing as you might see a teacher passing between your classes if say you have like a 9 to 10:15 class and they have like the 10:30 to 11:30 class or something like that. You might see them in passing as they're checking in their students and getting ready for their class, but it's like you're not really having like a deeper connection with them. And so you could teach at a studio where you barely even see like the other teachers, or maybe you don't even see a bunch of them because they teach different styles. So you never contact them to sub, or you never sub for them. You never pass them because your schedule doesn't work out. And a lot of studios don't do that regular of like staff get togethers or staff meetings because it's just so busy. So it's like maybe you see people like once a month, maybe once a quarter. And you have to be really intentional with that type of thing to actually meet like-minded people doing the same thing as you, like getting together for a practice or getting together for like a, hey, I'm working on this thing, got to run it by you type thing. So yeah, definitely feel very aligned with that. And I'm curious for anyone who's listening, who's like, yes, I just started, or I've been doing this for a couple of years. My journey's been a little bit lonely. Networking sounds like a great way to take care of myself. Like, what are some of the ways that you like to network? Like, what are some of your tips for networking?
I love networking. Sometimes I forget that it's one of my natural skills. So I love helping people come up with networking ideas. Um, the first one that I really love is creating a mastermind. And so that's a group of women or men. In my case, it was women, where there's about 4 or 6 of you, and you come together with common goals, and you meet regularly, whatever that's defined as the group, and talk about and celebrate, the successes in your life, and talk about what maybe you're struggling with or the roadblocks that you're encountering, and leaning on each other for wisdom and guidance and advice, and trusting within each person. And so that's something that, you can draw up like a friend. You maybe just start with one person, or if you know a few more people. And then the next thing is finding communities, maybe in person, um, or online. Actually, I've been doing both lately, and groups, and just go and try on the groups and hang out and see who you might discover on there. There are actually networking groups built with structure, so you get to introduce yourself, you get to practice, what it is that you are saying that you're doing, so people can relate, and you can meet a ton of people from there. And then lately, I've just been hanging out on social media. And if I see someone that I really like what they're doing, maybe I don't necessarily, want them to be a client, or, maybe I'm not their ideal client, but I just enjoy what they're doing. I'll reach out and say, hey, do you want to have a virtual coffee? Do you want to have an in-person coffee? And just go and just learn about the other person from a wholehearted place. No need to sell, just I'll always come from this place of service, which we're so good at as yogis, anyways, right? Like, how can I help that person? And that person will come back and just be awed by you and want to help you. And from there, you might get referrals. They might refer their mom or something. You just never know. Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you touched on the like online and in-person piece because I think both those can be really beneficial. And obviously for anyone listening, think about the setup of your business. If you're kind of entirely in person in your community, then I would say really networking in your community is something I would recommend. Although I still feel like, online there's so much you can learn from people if you're like looking for ideas to grow your business or workshop ideas that are not the same as what other people are offering in your local community. You can find people online, but Yeah, I feel like this has been huge for me. I think, a big part of my journey was like, hey, I'm going to start working for myself, which became like super, super solo. It was like one woman show over here for so long. And then my husband and I also embarked on like a nomadic journey. So we also didn't have our like friends and family in the form of community around us. So then it was kind of like just me at work and just us in our day to day. And so finding community was really important. And for my business, I really leaned into the online space. And I mean, you're an exception of somebody who I've actually like met in person, but like so many of the people that I've interacted with over the years, it's like I have these great relationships with them, yet I've never met them in person. And it's just like a beautiful reminder of how we can connect with people from all corners of the planet who are like minded and similar and can support us with what we're doing. So we can like build that online, but then we can also show up for our communities in person. So yeah, I love that.
It is a really cool time. I think, COVID really sparked a lot of loneliness within all of us. But at the same time, we have this gift now. You're absolutely right. Like we can get to know people in person and online, and then that just exponentially multiplies our network. And it's really incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. And so kind of like tying these all together, what are kind of your like words of wisdom or tips that you would leave people with in terms of kind of, yeah, bringing these like time management, goal setting, self-belief and networking all together to empower ourselves through our self-care?
Great question. I always forget you asked this, but you do, and I didn't prepare my tips like I always do. The recovering perfectionist would have had a list, everybody. Um, I would say, okay, as you listen to this, start with one thing. Did anything really resonate with you? And then from there you're practicing your intuition. Like, oh, I want to try, to focus more on my time management by, making sure that I have a morning routine or something like that. So try one thing at a time. And then still staying in the realm of time management. My favorite technique is time blocking. Amanda knows that, it's a really fun. I encourage you to check it out. If you want a little bit of help with it, I have a little mini course that trips out over 7 days. It's like videos, 10 minutes to 20 minutes each. And I'll show you how to time block and bullet journal and some other exciting stuff. And then the next tip is to think about what you want for your life, and know that it's possible now, that you can work towards some of it right now. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait 5, 10 years. You can set yourself up for the life that you want to live now. And then last but not least, remember that you're not alone. Really reach out. It takes that bit of self-belief that we talked about. And just explore and embrace your imperfections, your awkwardness. Goodness gracious, I'm so awkward at times, especially when I'm stressed out. But just, trust yourself along the way, and you've got so much ahead of you. It's a really fun experience to lean into.
Yeah, thank you for those. Those are beautiful tips, and I love how they, yeah, just connect everything together. And I also am a big fan of time blocking. I feel like time blocking has like really changed the game for me in terms of time management and productivity. And I would say pre-time blocking, I was still like a pretty productive person, but just having like an organized schedule and having like, these blocks for the things I need to do and then my to-do list, it's just been a game changer. And then I love how you kind of connected with the like, we don't have to do it alone, with like the belief in ourselves, because I feel like that is important. Like sometimes I think we kind of believe that we have to do it all alone. And I think that that was one thing that maybe I struggled with a little bit in the beginning. Like if I wasn't, putting in the hours and like doing the hard labor and like learning the things that I didn't know how to do, I wasn't really like succeeding as a business owner per se. And I feel like now I have a perspective of like, if you have capacity to reach out to somebody who can help you or hire somebody who can help you so that you can really focus on like your area of expertise, I think that that's like such a great way to run a business. But even if you don't have the resources to like hire somebody right now, I think even like we were talking about, like getting a mastermind of like-minded people where you can bounce ideas off, or like a business bestie or something like that, it is huge. Like that is probably one of the biggest game changers in my business. And I think it's just like, yeah, we really don't have to do it alone. So I'm thankful for that reminder.
I'm thankful for you and your podcast. It helps us remember that we're not alone, seriously. So you do it all the time.
Well, thank you. And you have so much cool stuff going on. You have so much cool stuff that is available to listeners to engage with. So why don't you share a little bit about, how they can connect with you, how they can learn more about you, what, if they're interested in like kind of following along or working with you, where all of that is.
Yes, I would love to hang out with you. This year, I'm hanging out on LinkedIn, everybody. I know we've been talking about Instagram this whole time for years, but I've branched off into LinkedIn, and I would love for you to come hang out with me there. And you can find me at Renee Clair. And the other thing that I'm doing that I'm so excited, I finally developed my own self-belief that I could do this. And my friends and colleagues said, why aren't you doing this? You should be doing it. I'm offering mini technology trainings every other week. I've called them Techie Tuesdays. They're totally free. I do a demo of a different software that most solopreneurs are using right now. And I show you tips on how to get yourself unstuck. So recently we've done ChatGPT, and I went over a task management software called ClickUp. And next up is Instagram. And I learned so much there. So I'm so excited to bestow my knowledge. So come hang out with me, head to my website to sign up. So that's www.renee-clair.com. And if you're ready for additional support to take your business from chaos to clarity, then I'd love to work with you. I do work with people one-on-one, and I have this knack for having things be super balanced. And so the way that I work with solopreneurs is by streamlining their businesses, motivational mindset, and clear purpose.
I love it. Yeah, it's so interesting with the Techie Tuesdays, because it's like this is like one of your gifts. You have this very interesting, diverse background, which people can learn more about if they listen to some of the other episodes. But working in, recruitment and project management, I feel like you've used like all these softwares, and you have always been like a go-to resource for me in terms of like, if I need to like know a software, I feel like you're my lady. And it's so cool that you're teaching other people about this now, because I feel like most yoga teachers, I'm just going to go ahead and put a stereotype generalization out there, are not familiar with all these. They're not like, they haven't used like Todoist and Asana and ClickUp, and they don't know the difference between them. They just know that they need something to organize themselves with. And they're like, somebody just tell me what to do and how to do it. So I think it's really beautiful that you're offering these. I think it's a really cool part of your business. So for anyone who is curious about this stuff, definitely check it out. And yeah, could not recommend working with Renee enough. I feel like I've had always like great experiences working with you. We always have to make sure we don't just spend our whole time socializing.
I know. Thank you. And thank you. It feels nice to receive that feedback, because I was so nervous to do this a few years ago. So I'm like, yeah, I conquered, that fear. So come watch me be perfect as I teach you about a software.
Yeah, I love it. It's the self-belief aspect of the empowerment through self-care.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Renee. This has been great. This has been so informative. And yeah, just thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much. It's always an honor to hang out with the MBO audience, and you as well. Thank you. Thank you. I hope everybody took something away.
All right, my friends, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Renee Clair. Make sure you go check her out, give her some love on social media, go check out her website. She's got lots of freebies and resources. And like I said in the show, I've worked with her before. Renee is fantastic. So if you feel like she could support you in her business, then definitely reach out to her and schedule a one-on-one. A big thank you to Offering Tree for sponsoring this episode. Make sure you guys go check them out, give them some love, see how they can support you in your business. And of course, a big thank you to you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to the show, and thank you for supporting me. All right, that's all from me. I will see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.